In the dust and danger of the American frontier, legends were born in blood and gun smoke. But perhaps no weapon has sparked more debate, fascination, and tall tales than the Colt Buntline Special. A gun so extravagant, with a barrel so long, it blurred the line between fact and fiction. Named for a dime novelist and allegedly gifted to lawmen who would become legends, this revolver represents the perfect marriage of American mythology and frontier reality. Was it a practical weapon of justice, a showman's prop, or something in between? The story of the Buntline Special isn't just about a gun. It's about how the West was won and how its story was told. In the realm where history meets legend, few weapons have sparked as much debate as the Colt Buntline Special. The tale begins not on the dusty streets of Tombstone or the cattle trails of Dodge City, but in the ink-stained hands of a man who never tamed the West with a gun, but with a pen. Edward Zane Carroll Judson, better known by his pen name Ned Buntline, was America's first literary celebrity, a man who crafted heroes from ordinary lawmen and turned frontier skirmishes into epic battles. By the 1870s, his dime novels had captivated the nation, transforming the raw, unfinished West into a romantic adventure for Eastern readers who would never smell prairie dust or hear a Comanche war cry. As the story goes, in 1876, Buntline strode into Colt's factory with an audacious request: 5 special order revolvers with barrels nearly twice the standard length, 12 inches of blued steel that would extend well beyond any practical holster. These weren't weapons for the common gunslinger. These were symbols, gifts for the frontier lawman, whose exploits he'd elevated to mythic status. Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, Bill Tillman, Charlie Bassett, and Neil Brown. The extended barrel wasn't just for show. In theory, it provided better accuracy at distance and the heft to serve as an impromptu club when necessary. Some versions came with detachable shoulder stocks, transforming a sidearm into something approaching a carbine. Here's where history and legend begin their dance. Colt's meticulous production records show no order for these distinctive weapons in 1876. Yet Wyatt Earp himself, in his later years, spoke of receiving such a revolver, though he claimed to have immediately cut the barrel down to a more manageable length. Masterson, for his part, was known to favor standard Colts throughout his career. The others left even fewer traces of these supposed gifts in the historical record. So was the Buntline Special merely a fiction, born in the same imagination that populated the West with larger-than-life heroes? Or were these weapons real, their documentation lost to time, or never properly recorded due to their custom nature? Perhaps this uncertainty is fitting. The Buntline Special lies halfway between required myth and proven reality, in the same twilight as much of Western history. In a frontier where reputation could prevent violence and perception often mattered more than reality, what better symbol than a weapon that might be more legend than steel? One thing remains certain. Whether these guns existed as described or not, the story of the Buntline Special captures something essential about the American West, a place where history and mythology have always shared the same holster. In the arsenal of the American West, where function typically dictated form, the Colt Buntline Special stood as a magnificent anomaly. With its extraordinary 12-inch barrel jutting forward like an accusatory finger, it demanded attention in a world where most revolvers tucked discreetly into holsters at just 7.5 inches total length. Picture yourself as a frontier lawman, dust kicking up around your boots as you face down a notorious outlaw. Your hand drops to your hip, fingers wrapping around the grip of your buntline. But then comes the awkward moment of truth. That magnificent barrel, nearly as long as your forearm, catches on leather or cloth. In the time it takes to clear it, a man with a standard revolver could have fired twice. "Any man foolish enough to carry that cannon," one old-timer reportedly said, Better be damn sure he's drawn it before trouble starts. Yet what the Buntline sacrificed in convenience, it gained in other qualities. The extended barrel created a longer sight radius, potentially turning a good shot into a great one. At 50 yards, a distance where most revolvers became little more than noisemakers, a steady hand could place shots with remarkable precision. The added weight at the muzzle reduced recoil, allowing for quicker follow-up shots for those skilled enough to wield it. Most intriguing was the detachable shoulder stock, transforming a sidearm into a compact carbine. When screwed into the backstrap, this wooden appendage allowed the shooter to brace the weapon against their shoulder, steadying aim over greater distances. In effect, one weapon could serve two distinct purposes: close quarters defender and medium-range precision tool. The shoulder stock also created legal ambiguity. In towns where carrying rifles was restricted, a buntline with its stock detached remained technically a handgun. The stock itself could be carried separately, innocuous as any wooden implement until needed. Wyatt Earp, perhaps the most famous alleged recipient, apparently recognized both the weapon's limitations and possibilities. According to accounts from his later years, he promptly cut the barrel down to a more manageable 8 inches, sacrificing some accuracy, but gaining practicality while retaining the distinctive appearance. This modification hints at the fundamental tension at the heart of the Buntline Special. It was simultaneously practical and impractical, a working tool and a symbol of authority, a weapon and a warning. In the unforgiving landscape of frontier justice, where split-second decisions meant life or death, the Buntline offered something beyond mere firepower. It projected an image of deliberate, calculated force. For the men who carried them, if they truly did, the Buntline wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement written in blued steel. Long after the last cattle drive ended and the frontier was declared closed, the Colt Buntline Special continued to fire rounds in the American imagination. What began as 5 custom revolvers, if they existed at all, evolved into something far more powerful, a symbol of the mythic West that Americans desperately needed to believe in. By the dawn of the 20th century, the actual West had been tamed by barbed wire and railroad tracks, but its legends were just beginning to grow. A man with a buntline wasn't just another shootist. He was someone who stood apart, someone who made the laws rather than just enforced them. In the 1950s, the Buntline Special experienced yet another resurrection. Now, the long-barreled revolver became shorthand for a particular kind of frontier justice: deliberate, theatrical, and larger than life. Today, firearms manufacturers regularly produce Buntline Special reproductions that sell out within weeks of hitting the market. These modern versions command prices that would have purchased several ranches in the 1870s frontier. Collectors pursue them not for practical use, but to hold a piece of American mythology in their hands. What makes the Buntline fascinating, explains one Western historian, is how a weapon that may have barely existed in historical fact became essential in cultural memory. The Buntline doesn't need to have been real to be true. This paradox lies at the heart of America's relationship with its frontier past. The Buntline Special represents the West not as it was, but as we needed it to be. A place where justice was visible from a distance, where heroism could be measured in inches of steel, where good and evil declared themselves before the first shot was fired. Perhaps the real legacy of the Buntline Special isn't about firepower or frontier justice at all. Perhaps it's about the enduring power of story. In a nation built on reinvention, the Buntline reminds us that sometimes the tales we tell become more important than the facts they're based on. The gun with a 12-inch barrel continues to fire, not lead, but imagination. A weapon that never runs empty, never jams, and still hits its mark nearly 150 years after it may or may not have first appeared on the American frontier.